So picture someone in your life, like maybe it's a coworker who always dominates the meetings, or, that one relative who kind of holds court at every family gathering.
Oh, yeah, we all know the type.
Right. And they constantly use this biting, dismissive sarcasm. Or maybe they just love making a really condescending joke at someone else's expense. And honestly, society heavily conditions us to view that as, like, a sign of intellect.
Yeah.
We think, oh, they're sharp, they're in control, they're just effortlessly asserting dominance.
But, I mean, what if science actually proved they aren't establishing dominance at all?
Which is wild to think about.
Right. What if that mockery is actually just a neurochemical alarm bell signaling massive social insecurity? Because that is the reality we are unpacking today. The research basically shows that a cutting tongue is not a sign of a secure mind. It's actually this highly evolved, biologically expensive defense mechanism.
And welcome to Today in the Hypothesis. We are so glad you're joining us. For this deep dive, we are pulling apart a massive interdisciplinary paper prepared for the independent researcher Victor H. Sertouche. It's titled The Dialectics of Derision.
And it really covers everything. I mean, evolutionary biology, neuroscience, sociology, even ancient philosophy.
Yeah, and the core thesis just completely flips the script on how we view sarcasm. The mocker isn't, standing on this mountain of self-esteem. They're actually drowning in biological stress.
Exactly. And to understand the mechanics of that stress, we really have to look back at the evolutionary blueprints of teasing. Like, we share an ancestor with the great apes, dating back roughly 13 million years.
Wow, 13 million.
Yeah. And if you observe juvenile apes today, like chimpanzees or orangutans, you see this very specific behavior that researchers call response looking.
Response looking. What does that look like?
So a juvenile will walk up to this massive, mature adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll yank its hair or steal a piece of food, and then they instantly freeze and stare directly into the adult's face.
Oh, I see. So they're essentially running a real-time risk assessment.
They are. They're gauge calibrating the social boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
They basically want to know exactly how much disruption they can cause without provoking, a lethal physical retaliation from the alpha.
Just testing the waters, but in a very asymmetrical, one-sided way. But wait, I'm trying to square that with how animals play. Because isn't teasing just a normal part of mammalian play? Like dogs do it, cats do it.
Well, there's a crucial biological distinction between playful teasing and true play.
Okay.
In tolerant, egalitarian primate societies like bonobos, true play is entirely mutual. It involves cooperative signaling, reciprocal grooming, and this specific facial expression researchers literally call the play face.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Right. But in rigid, despotic societies, take Japanese macaques, for example, which operate on this strict, resource-driven, linear hierarchy, true play is heavily inhibited.
So the teasing isn't friendly?
Not at all. The teasing you see there isn't about bonding. It is strictly about mapping out the hierarchy to see exactly who you can exploit.
Man. Which brings us to the terrifying stage of primate adolescence. Because those boundary-pushing juveniles, they eventually hit puberty. And the paper describes this window of hormonal delinquency.
Yeah, it is a highly volatile phase. Because before an animal's prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for restraint in mature social interaction, before that's fully formed, their bodies are just suddenly flooded with hormones.
So they have all this power and zero impulse control.
Precisely. In the wild, adolescent male chimpanzees will leverage this new unearned physical strength to throw massive tantrums. But here's the thing, they don't target the mature alpha males.
Let me guess, they target the weaker ones.
Exactly. They specifically target females or younger apes who are easily intimidated.
Wow, so they're literally punching down to practice dominance. And the example with the elephants in the source material paints such a vivid picture of this.
Oh, the teenage elephants?
Yeah. If you have a gang of adolescent male elephants and there are no mature, dominant bulls around to kind of suppress their testosterone surges, these teenage elephants will go completely rogue. They will literally terrorize and kill other animals like rhinos for absolutely no reason other than to flex their physical power.
It's raw, unfiltered status seeking. And biology tracks that status with, mathematical precision. The research looks at wild yellow baboons using something called the ELO rating system.
Wait, ELO? Like in chess?
Exactly like chess. In chess, if a grandmaster loses to a total novice, their mathematical rating plummets dramatically, while the novice's rating skyrockets. Researchers found that baboon biology computationally models the exact same winner and loser effects.
So it's not just a social demotion, it's actually physical.
Far from it. When a baboon suffers a social defeat, their physiology fundamentally shifts. Their biological probability of winning the next conflict actually drops. Their very biology adapts to being a subordinate.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
From a purely Darwinian perspective, if establishing dominance through bullying and aggression secures your rank and gets you resources, isn't that a highly successful evolutionary strategy? Like, why are we calling it a defense mechanism if it works?
See, that is the exact tension at the heart of this research.
Yeah.
And the data on human adolescents, specifically looking at the National Child Development Study and the British Cohort Study, it provides a deeply nuanced answer.
What did they find?
Well, aggressive bullies do achieve certain evolutionary markers faster. They tend to have earlier sexual intercourse and more children.
Okay, so it works.
Sort of. But they pay a massive biological tax for that strategy. In the long term, former adolescent bullies report significantly worse physical and mental health.
Oh, wow. It's like redlining a car engine. You know, you might look incredibly loud and fast off the starting line. You might take the early lead, but you are literally destroying the engine's internal components. Like, the wear and tear is unsustainable.
That's a perfect analogy. The machinery breaks down, and that physical toll permanently alters your cellular neurochemistry. There's this physiological mechanism at play called the dual hormone hypothesis, which dictates exactly how we process threats to our social status.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I always kind of assumed testosterone was just, the confidence hormone. The more you have, the more dominant you feel.
Yeah, that is a really widespread misconception. Endogenous testosterone only leads to dominant, confident behavior if your baseline cortisol is low.
And cortisol is the stress one, right?
Exactly. Cortisol is your primary stress biomarker. So if you are a highly anxious, subordinate individual constantly worried about your status, your body's emergency dispatch center, the HPA axis, just floods your system with cortisol.
And what does that do to the testosterone?
It literally blocks or reverses its dominant effects. So instead of feeling secure and assertive, you are trapped in a state of chronic physiological alarm.
Which perfectly explains why a deeply insecure person relies on sarcastic mockery instead of just, secure, direct communication. But where does that neurochemical stress actually go? Because we aren't wild baboons fighting in the dirt. We're sitting in boardrooms and family dining rooms.
Right. The context changes, but the biology doesn't.
Yeah, and the craziest study in this entire paper, the crayfish study, it actually maps how this stress physically reshapes the nervous system after a loss.
Oh, the crayfish study is a landmark piece of electrophysiology. So researchers looked at the lateral giant interneuron in crayfish.
Which does what, exactly?
It's the specific nerve circuit that controls the animal's escape response. Basically, how quickly it flips its tail to flee a predator. They found that the neurotransmitter serotonin alters this nerve circuit in a way that is entirely dependent on whether the crayfish is a winner or a loser.
Wait, so if two dominant crayfish fight and one loses and becomes the subordinate, what happens to its brain chemistry?
The serotonin literally flips its function. In a dominant crayfish, serotonin enhances the escape response, making the animal sharper, more reactive. But the moment it suffers a social defeat, serotonin suddenly inhibits that same response.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the actual chemical changes its job based entirely on social status.
But the truly mind-blowing part is how long that change lasts. Because it's not just a temporary mood swing, right?
No, it takes up to 38 days for that neurochemical change to revert.
Mm-hmm.
For over a month, that crayfish carries the physical, cellular imprint of social defeat.
It's like a biological bad credit score. I mean, you can change your behavior tomorrow, you can submit to the alpha, but that negative mark stays on your cellular record for a month, literally demanding payment in the form of stress.
Exactly.
And modern humans have our own version of this, right? The paper mentions something called the DACC.
Yes, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. This is basically the brain's alarm system for social rejection, and it literally shares neural pathways with the network that registers physical pain.
So rejection literally hurts.
It does. And alongside the dorsal raphe nucleus, which projects serotonin to our prefrontal cortex, it acts as an internal ledger of our social rank. When we sense a threat to our status, that social pain network just lights up.
It hurts. So we launch a preemptive, derisive strike. We mock others because our cells are screaming that we are losing status and we just need to drag someone else down to balance the ledger.
That's exactly the mechanism.
So we've got this cellular bad credit score and we need to hide it from the world. How does that manifest clinically in adults?
It solidifies into psychological armor,
Right.
specifically what Alfred Adler termed the superiority complex.
Now, that's a term that gets thrown around casually all the time, but the paper gives it a very rigid clinical definition, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with genuine confidence.
Right, because genuine self-confidence is this stable, quiet construct. It's built on a realistic appraisal of your own abilities and verified success. You don't need to announce it.
But a superiority complex is different.
Totally different. It's a fragile, inflated projection of supreme authority. Its entire function is to mask deep-seated, agonizing feelings of inferiority.
And the way a child actually develops this blueprint is totally paradoxical. I mean, you would assume a superiority complex comes from a kid just being overly pampered, right? Like being told they are a genius every single day.
Well, that is one pathway. Excessive pampering, where a child is shielded from all consequences and told they are always right. It teaches them that being ordinary is just unacceptable. But the exact opposite childhood experience creates the exact same complex.
Which is what?
Hypercritical emotional neglect.
So the kid who can never do anything right.
Correct. Children facing impossible parental expectations learn that their inherent worth is strictly conditional on their performance. So in both cases, the child develops this rigid psychological blueprint where admitting any flaw or simply being vulnerable equates to total emotional abandonment.
Oh, wow. I can hear people listening to this right now thinking, wait, a fragile ego, masking deep insecurity, tearing other people down. Isn't that just narcissistic personality disorder?
It is a vital clinical distinction because while both present with grandiosity in this prickly, sarcastic exterior, individuals with a superiority complex retain their capacity for genuine empathy.
Really?
Yeah, if you can dismantle that defensive armor, they can experience sincere remorse.
Yeah.
They actually recognize the damage their mockery causes.
And the narcissist doesn't.
Right. Those with narcissistic personality disorder have a severe neurological deficit in empathy. They're fundamentally unable to process their own flaws or feel that type of remorse.
So with the superiority complex, they are trapped behind the shield, but there is a real feeling person back there. The problem is, modern society actively encourages us to keep the shield up. Like the paper details this culture of witty sadism.
Oh, definitely. Especially in high-stress, service-oriented professions where people feel a profound loss of autonomy.
Right, you see it frequently where professionals need to assert intellectual dominance over the people they're serving. And the IT support staff example in the text was hilarious, but so dark.
Oh, the acronyms.
Yeah. The paper notes that IT workers frequently use coded acronyms to mock the people asking them for help. They will log a ticket as an ID10T error, which literally spells idiot, or a PICNIC error, which stands for problem in chair, not in computer.
It's a classic defense mechanism. Flight attendants face similar dynamics, dealing with a public that often treats them pretty poorly. The text mentions instances of flight crews actually getting disciplined for posting pictures online mocking the backs of passengers' heads, referring to them as broccoli.
Broccoli. And then there's the anesthesia lawsuit. A patient won $500,000 because his phone accidentally recorded his surgical team mercilessly mocking his body and his medical history while he was unconscious.
It's horrific.
We are literally paying $500,000 for sarcastic comments because the sting of derision is recognized as genuine, actionable trauma. So we know why we do it. But exactly how is this mockery deployed? Do we all use sarcasm the same way?
Not at all. The deployment of mockery is heavily moderated by our socioeconomic status and our gender socialization.
How so?
Well, sociological research in the paper contrasts working-class parenting with middle-class parenting. Working-class parents often socialize children to be cooperative, patient, and to solve problems independently without relying on authorities.
Because they assume the system won't help them anyway. The text points out that lower socioeconomic individuals often face chronic unfairness, which leads to learned helplessness, like they habituate to the stress, which often turns inward as depression.
Exactly. Conversely, middle-class parents socialize children to aggressively secure advantages at all costs. They view authorities and institutions as resources to be leveraged. Because high socioeconomic individuals become accustomed to favorable treatment, they develop a strong sense of entitlement.
Right. They become hypersensitive to any perceived unfairness directed at them, while remaining completely blind to the systemic inequalities that actually benefit them.
Keep it a sec.
And when you overly gender on top of these status anxieties, the research reveals what we can call the sarcasm matrix in adolescence.
Yeah, the sarcasm matrix. Society strongly associates physical aggression with masculinity and indirect, covert aggression with femininity.
So what does that look like neurologically? Because the paper mentions relational aggression and something called alpha band synchronization. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, relational aggression is behavior calculated to damage someone's social standing. It's the strategic rumor, the social exclusion, the backhanded compliment. Brain imaging actually shows that when hostile women engage in this, they utilize widespread alpha band synchronization.
What does that mean in plain English?
Think of it like a neural traffic cop. It throws up a red light, actively inhibiting any impulsive physical reaction. This gives the prefrontal cortex time to calculate a highly strategic, socially devastating verbal response instead.
Oh, wow. It's weaponized patience. So for teenage girls who are socialized to avoid physical fights, they use aggressive sarcasm as the perfect vehicle for this covert warfare. It lets them systematically destroy a peer's reputation while maintaining a polite, smiling facade. But what about for teenage boys?
Boys use sarcasm more like verbal rough-and-tumble play. They use benign jocularity to build solidarity with their friends, but they will deploy biting sarcasm with, say, their brothers to establish local dominance hierarchies without having to actually throw a punch.
But here's the fascinating paradox the paper points out. What happens when a teenage boy crosses that gender line?
Oh, the popularity boost.
Yeah, if a boy uses relational aggression like gossip or social exclusion, but he wraps it in a thick layer of sarcastic humor, it massively subverts societal expectations. The shock value is so high that his peers perceive him as exceptionally witty. He actually gets a massive popularity boost.
Which completely reinforces the biological urge. Mockery becomes this low-risk, incredibly high-reward tool to secure status. And there's a profound historical precedent for this dynamic.
Right, like in France?
Yeah, if you look at the 18th century French court of Versailles, an aristocrat's entire political and financial survival depended on this witty sadism. You derived your status by cleverly ridiculing rivals while meticulously avoiding becoming the butt of a joke yourself.
And slightly later in Britain, during the golden age of satire, artists like William Hogarth used caricature to attack corrupt power structures. Because direct, sincere criticism of the monarch would land you in prison, satirists relied on plausible deniability.
It was only a joke.
The ultimate defense mechanism. You launch a devastating attack, and the moment you face pushback, you retreat behind the shield of humor, making the victim look crazy for being offended.
It's the exact same strategy used today in internet troll culture to dodge accountability.
Yes. So we have the neuroscience, the sociology, the history, but long before we had MRI machines to track alpha band synchronization, humanity already knew exactly what was happening.
The interdisciplinary nature of this paper is brilliant here. Ancient philosophical and theological systems diagnose the internal disease of mockery with astounding accuracy.
Yeah, in ancient Hebrew scriptures, there is a recurring archetype known as the scoffer.
And the scoffer is essentially a perfect mirror of Adler's superiority complex.
Exactly. The scriptures describe a scoffer as someone marked by an absolute lack of humble openness to change. They're driven by this deep root of bitterness. It's not just a person telling jokes, it is mockery on a mission. Their ultimate goal is to actively prove others foolish in order to protect their own fragile ego.
Because underneath that loud veneer of supreme confidence, theological analysis argues the scoffer feels profoundly out of control. They have an intense pathological need to control their environment and tear down anyone who introduces uncertainty.
And the Buddhist perspective aligns perfectly with this. The text brings up the concept of right speech. In Buddhism, the morality of what you say isn't just about the words themselves. It is evaluated by the underlying mental state producing them. Sarcasm is categorized as unwholesome speech because it invariably stems from the three poisons,
Which are greed, delusion, and aversion.
Greed being the desire to elevate yourself above others. Delusion is the belief in this permanent superior ego that desperately needs defending. And aversion is simply anger. People love to say, oh, I just use sarcasm to relieve tension. But Buddhist teachings argue that sarcasm is just a manifestation of cowardice and anger. It's a total lack of mindfulness.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. If mockery is an expensive, destructive defense mechanism rooted in a hyperactive stress response, bad cellular credit, and a fragile ego, how do we actually cure it?
Right, what are the interventions? Because we can't just accept that everyone is doomed to be miserable and sarcastic.
Well, the paper outlines solutions on 3 distinct levels. Clinically, addressing that superiority complex requires what psychologists call compassionate confrontation. A therapist has to gently help the individual decouple their self-worth from their performance.
So you have to dismantle that childhood blueprint. You have to prove to them that making a mistake or being vulnerable does not equal emotional abandonment.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then on a cultural and systemic level, we have to change the environments that reward witty sadism. Workplaces, hospitals, and academic institutions need to fundamentally restructure their peer evaluation systems.
So penalize the bullies.
Exactly. We must actively penalize dismissive communication and chronic criticism, rather than promoting the person who ruthlessly cuts everyone else down in boardroom meetings.
Stop promoting the scoffer. But what about biologically? Can we actually clear that 38-day cellular debt and rewire the brain?
We can. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is highly effective here. It actively trains the prefrontal cortex, the logical reasoning part of your brain, to literally dampen the amygdala's alarm system.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, by consciously practicing how to reappraise social risk, you can actually turn down the volume on that DACC social pain network. You reduce the physiological urge to launch a preemptive sarcastic strike because your brain stops misinterpreting an awkward silence as a lethal threat.
That is incredibly empowering. We are not just at the mercy of our cortisol levels. We can transition from fear-driven social structures to ones based on genuine, validating communication.
You really can.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with the ultimate takeaway from today in the hypothesis. The next time someone hits you with biting sarcasm or a demeaning joke or tries to make you feel small, I want you to completely reframe the interaction in your mind.
Remember the research.
Yes, remember the research we covered today. You are not witnessing an impressive display of intellect. You are not watching a masterclass in social dominance. You are watching an anxious primate's cortisol levels spike as they desperately try to shield their fragile ego.
It is such a powerful lens to view the world through. And it raises one final provocative question to ponder as we conclude. If mockery and derision are just symptoms of societal and biological stress, what would happen if we applied that same grace to ourselves? Think about your own sarcastic internal monologue, the harsh way you might mock yourself in the mirror or berate yourself for a simple mistake. What if you started treating that internal voice not as the objective truth, but simply as a neurochemical stress response, a biological alarm bell that you actually have the power to ignore?
Are we bullying our own biology? That is a profound thought to sit with. Thank you all so much for joining us for today in The Hypothesis. If this deep dive changed the way you view human interaction, please subscribe to the show so you never miss an insight. And do us a favor, share this specific deep dive with a friend, or, maybe strategically forward it to that one coworker who unironically uses the term PIC and ICE. We will see you next time.